toward Ovechkin. Alex, 2 goals in game 1. Here comes Sandin along the near side as Carrier threw his body in front of it. Strowman, a shot attempt that gets blocked. A rebound out to Sandin, and he can't get it through. The Canadians will clear it to center, and now one man back in Roy. Dvorak goes cross ice, and it's picked up by Armia. They scramble, a shot, and it kicks off Thompson and scrims on the other side. Jake Evans almost tied it. He had most of the net to shoot at, and Thompson just did get a piece of it as the Caps get back into the offensive zone. That was almost disaster in a tie game. It was not. It came out the other side.
Wow, what a goaltending night for Logan Thompson, especially in the third period. When I watch a game like last night, I'm always reminded about something that Tarek El-Bashir said to me 10, 15 years ago on the air. He was talking about the NHL playoffs, and he said the sport this time of year shouldn't be called hockey. It should be called goalie. Logan Thompson, the star last night. Third period, amazing. The Caps take a 2-0 lead in the series. They are headed to Montreal and the Bell Center for Game 3 tomorrow night. Good morning, everybody. Al Koken will join me in 20 minutes to talk about the game last night. A second straight game where Montreal, I don't know much about hockey, but I thought they played very well in the third period. And the Caps were kind of holding on for dear life last night, courtesy of their goaltender making incredible saves, who, by the way, was a question mark coming into the series off an injury. But we will get to Smoke and Al at 10:25 and do some hockey with Al. But it is the night of NFL Draft 2025 first round. And we'll have coverage here all day long on my show, Chris's show, Craig's show. Craig will be on until 8 tonight, and then Linnell and Toby will take over to host a draft show on the station from 8 p.m. until 1 a.m. I was thinking about this, that if Washington stays at 29 and makes a pick at 29, and every team uses its full allotted 10 minutes to pick, we're talking 280 minutes before Washington would be on the clock. I mean, I can do that math. That would be 4 hours and 40 minutes. That would be 12:40 before they're on the clock. Now, not every team takes 10 minutes. Even when television stretches some of this stuff out, my guess is that they pick sometime between 11:30 and midnight, something like that. Maybe sooner. Some teams go pretty quickly. But it'll be a wait. It'll be a wait for the first time in a while. But the draft is awesome, man. It's also such a good television show every year. Even if, the players that are picked, there's about a 30% chance they'll end up being significant contributors to a team over the next 3 years or within 3 years. And look, every year, this is about the quarterbacks, which leads me to this from Marcus. Oh, Marcus. Marcus writes, Kevin, I really hope tonight isn't the Shedeur Sanders show. To watch him watch the board go by without being selected when there are 31 other players who will be realizing their dreams tonight. Please let your ESPN friends know that this isn't about one man. There are so many other beautiful stories to be shared. Thank you, Marcus. Marcus, I do have friends at ESPN, but I'm pretty sure letting them know how you feel won't make a difference. If the other 31 players that get picked in the first round, if they're not quarterbacks, if they wanted the bulk of attention on draft night, they should have played quarterback, because this sport has always been about the quarterbacks, and tonight is almost always about the quarterbacks, even when the quarterbacks aren't very good and aren't necessarily first-round material. But when you get a story like Shedeur Sanders, the son of Deion Sanders, and the attention that Colorado got because of primetime, because of his sons, plural, Shedeur in particular, because people have been mocking Shedeur Sanders super high in this draft before last year's draft. And now it appears as if he could fall, maybe completely out of the first round. Yeah, this isn't, all due respect to the other players, and you'll get plenty on them. It's not like they get ignored. But this sport has always been quarterback first, quarterback second, and then maybe count 5 spaces, as Coach Thompson would say, before you get to whatever is next. You'll hear a lot about the other 31 players, but trust me, ESPN, they're not stupid. The show and the attention of the audience will be on the quarterbacks and on where Shedeur Sanders goes, if he goes at all in the first round. Should be exciting tonight. We got a lot coming up on the show. I promised you I would do corners. We're going to make our picks for who Washington will select on the show today. Craig and Chris will both jump on with me, so we'll do a little 980 pick segment at 11:40. Ben Standig at 12. I mentioned Al Koken coming up at 10:25, and maybe one other guest on the show as well, hoping to get somebody that always joins me this time of year to talk about the draft before the end of today's show. We'll give you guys a chance, hopefully, as well, to weigh in on what you want. But let's get to a big story last night, certainly on social media, with a lot of Washington fans, HTTR and HTTC fans. This was the president last night being asked about the new stadium in D.C. and the team name.
When you go back to Indians, they told us they don't know why these names are being taken off. They're trying to, I think it's degrading to the Indian population, and it's a great population. And they like when they're, called by various names. Now, Washington, the Redskins, perhaps that's a little bit different. But I can tell you that I spoke to people of Indian heritage that love that name and they love that team. And I think it's I think it's a superior name to what they have right now. And it had heritage behind it. It had something special. But a lot of the names having to do with, different places, not just Indians, but I think it's they changed the name of the Cleveland Indians.
He also said, and I don't think we caught it there, he also said something about the name. He said, Redskins, perhaps that's a little different, but I can tell you I spoke to people of Indian heritage and they love that name and they love that team. Maybe we did play that part and I just missed that part. So, look, this lit up social media last night, certainly in our, world of Washington football fans. There's something that I've talked about a few times, and that is, before the stadium got to this state, the city's control again, with the RFK site plan that passed, at 2 a.m. in the morning, courtesy actually of Chuck Schumer, of all people, considering that the president now is weighing in on the team name. That maybe, Trump would somehow tie a return to the city or a quid pro quo on the land being turned over to the city with the team going back to its old name. So this was brought up, obviously, yesterday. Somebody asked him about it. It was not something that he offered up. There's something that Tom Lavero had mentioned in a column about 2 months ago. My first thought was, well, how can he force the team to change the name back? The city now has the land. They have control over the land. They've got a lease that's like 100 years where they can do with the land what they choose to do with the land. Like, what sort of, control or what sort of mechanism could he use to create a scenario in which, and by the way, this would be awesome for some of us, many of us, the majority of us, if somehow he were able to get Josh Harris, who, by the way, has been he's donated to Trump and is friendly with Trump and has been friendly with Trump for a while, if they could get the team to go back to the old name. 2025 is much different than 2020. And I thought, I'm like, how can they do that? Like, they can't. They could take over the city. He's threatened that, in recent months. But Tom wrote something a few months ago in one of his columns, and I was reminded of it. And it's called something called the DC Financial Control Board. The DC Financial Control Board was actually established during the Clinton administration in 1995. It was a 5-member body established by the United States Congress to oversee the finances of the city. It was created through the District of Columbia's Financial Responsibility and Management Assistance Act of 1995. And the board had the power to override decisions by DC's mayor and the city council. Now, it suspended its activities 6 years after it was established on September 30th, 2001, 24 plus years ago, or coming up on 24 years ago, when the district achieved a consecutive budget balanced for the 4th consecutive year. And so they suspended it, but they have the ability, Tom wrote, to resurrect that. Why is that important? Because ultimately the city may control the land, but if Congress controls the finances of the city with a 5-member U.S. Congress board overseeing it, they could stop the process of the $850 million going to infrastructure for this deal. What do I think is going to happen to all of this? I don't know. It obviously excited so many people. The idea of, wow, a new stadium in D.C. tied to, courtesy of this administration, a change back to the old name. I would bet against it. But there's always hope that something could happen. Keep in mind, when he said the Redskins perhaps a little different than the Chiefs and Indians, we know that it's different, okay? The difference being it is dictionary defined as pejorative, as insensitive. Even though overwhelmingly over the years, Native Americans themselves have said, as he pointed out, they don't have an issue. They don't consider the name to be insensitive. They like the name. They didn't want it changed in the first place. We all know that. We've all followed the story over the years. Forget the outside noise. We've been involved in following this from the inside. We've seen and read every single poll. We know that we had people that we knew, like Cooley, associated with the team, going to many reservations, 40 to 50 reservations over a few year period. And overwhelmingly, they didn't want the name changed. They didn't consider it to be insensitive. Now, every reservation, every tribe is very autonomous. It's a very, autonomous situation. There are over 500 tribes, and everybody's got a different opinion. But overwhelmingly, we've seen the polling reflect it's not insensitive to us. We don't think that the name should be changed. However, it is different than Chiefs and Indians. We can acknowledge that as well because of the dictionary definition, which is why starting 15 years ago, I suggested to Bruce Allen and others, apply for a second non-pejorative dictionary definition. Redskins, noun. This is the second definition. The football team that plays in Washington, D.C. Redskins, noun. A player who plays for the Redskins in Washington, a player who plays for the professional football team who plays in Washington, D.C. Language evolves. There are always updates and new definitions created. And that would end that part of the debate. But we'll see whether or not anything comes of this. My guess is it won't. Part of what Josh Harris, Mitch Rales, and ownership, what they were able to do a few months ago is they were able to take the momentum of 12-5, 2 road playoff wins, 60 minutes from the Super Bowl with a superstar rookie quarterback and say, we don't have to go down this path. But remember, the path that they were trying to avoid because of complexity, A, B, cost, is coming up with a new name, not going back to the old name. Going back to the old name would be a gold mine, and they understand that too. But it's been more about the league pushing back and saying, nope, that horse left the barn. We're not going back to something that's controversial. Whether it should be controversial with people who make it controversial or not, it doesn't matter. We know what the result will be. We will have corporate sponsors that will say their consumers and their shareholders don't like this. And they've already done it. It was hard to do it, but they already got it done. Thank you, Fred Smith. And they're not going to go back to it. That's all I got on that. Honestly, my hunch is not a lot will come of this. That the city controls the land, that the DC control board, financial control board won't be resurrected to stop the city from financing infrastructure for a new stadium, and that eventually we'll see if the stadium doesn't move forward, it would be more because of pushback from constituents, from city council members, from this $410 million cut required in the 2025 budget, things like that. All right, we got a lot of draft to talk about. I have some predictions on tonight's draft. I've got 3 related NFL predictions, and I've got 3 related Washington predictions. I'm going to do my 3 related NFL predictions right now. Then we'll have Koken jump on to talk hockey, and then I'll have my 3 Washington predictions later on this hour. But I've got 3 what I would consider to be somewhat bold NFL draft predictions.
A little hot taken.
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually yesterday after the show, and I did some of this on my podcast yesterday, but I felt in just looking at the quarterbacks over the last week and then reading about how Shedeur Sanders is dropping, there have been some very damning quotes out there about Shedeur Sanders. Anonymous NFL scouts saying the interview processes were disasters, that he's not that good. He doesn't see it. I think a lot of that is true personally about his on the field performance. But bold NFL draft prediction number 1 is this. Only 1 quarterback goes tonight in the first round. Only 1. By the way, have you seen Shedeur Sanders? Some of the odds on Shedeur,
they've been
over-under on the pick spot was like 9.5 2 days ago because of New Orleans at 9. Now it's 21.5.
It's crazy.
Yeah, because of Pittsburgh. If Pittsburgh doesn't take him at 21, because it certainly appears as if New Orleans will not take him at 21. If Pittsburgh takes Jackson Dart or doesn't take a quarterback, he's not going in the first round unless somebody trades back into the first round to take him. So bold prediction number 1 is that there's just 1 quarterback, and it's Cam Ward at number 1 overall. The over-under is still at 2.5.
You're not a Jackson Dart believer, Kevin?
I'm not a Jackson Dart believer as a big-time starting NFL quarterback.
That we agree. But GMs are dumb, and I could see some GM trading back into the first to get this kid.
I think if somebody trades back into the first to get somebody, it would be Tyler Shook.
Oh, even worse decision, but we can get to that
He's
later.
the one that looks the part at 6'5", with a good arm, throws with anticipation. By the way, I'm not a massive fan of him either. I think he ultimately could be like Will Levis. He could be more of a backup quarterback. I see Jackson Dart and even Shook to a certain degree as products of very good systems. Jeff Brom at Louisville and obviously Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Jackson Dart has some moxie to him and has some playmaking ability to him. I don't see Shedeur Sanders. I've been saying this. Denton and I have been talking about this since early in the college football season. And so I don't see a quarterback other than Cam Ward going. It's bold. I'm not saying I'm going to be right. I wanted to be a little bit bold. The over-under on quarterbacks in the first round is 2.5 right now. There's no way we're getting 3. I would go under that. Although I'm a little bit skeptical as to why it's still hanging in there at 2.5. Now it's costly to go under. Like I'm seeing 2.5 unders minus 195.
Ooh.
So you got to pay to go under. So that's bold prediction number 1. Bold prediction number 2. And I have to clarify this one. If we take Travis Hunter out of the equation as a receiver, even though I think that's the position that most GMs believe he'll be great at and will focus on first. But because he's wide receiver, corner, whatever, all-time athlete in the draft, whatever you want to describe him at, I'm not going to count him as the first wide receiver taken. So the bold prediction is that the first wide receiver taken, the first wide receiver after Travis Hunter taken, won't be the consensus favorite, Tet McMillan from Arizona. He's currently minus 290 as a favorite to be that first receiver, or if you count Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, the second receiver taken. I think it's going to be another receiver that goes before him. I don't see it with him. He's not Mike Evans. He's not a guy, to me, that's top half of the first round, and that's where you see him getting mocked. I could see Matthew Golden getting picked before him. I could see Luther Burden being selected before him, even though I don't think Washington will select Burden because of the things that we talked about last week. I love Luther Burden as a player. I could see either one of those two guys getting selected before Tet McMillan from Arizona. So that is my second bold prediction, that the consensus receiver to be taken first, or if you want to call it second after Travis Hunter, McMillan from Arizona, won't be. Another receiver will go before him. And then lastly, this is bold, I think. Maybe not. The Bengals at 17 will take a pass rusher, maybe Mike Green, maybe Donovan Azaruko from Boston College, and then they will trade Trey Hendrickson. And they will trade him to New England, not Washington. A second and a third rounder. The price will come down from Cincinnati after they draft a pass rusher at 17, and they will deal Trey Hendrickson, who desperately wants out of Cincinnati, wants to get paid, and the price has been too high. They've been asking for a first plus. Once they get their pass rusher at 17, we will see a trade prior to Friday night where Cincinnati picks up a second and a third rounder from New England for Trey Hendrickson, and then the Patriots will have to pay him. Look, the Patriots have the cap space, and the Patriots have the picks. They have 2 third rounders. They've got a second and 2 thirds. Those are the 3 NFL draft predictions. 1 quarterback, that's bold. Tet McMillan's not the first receiver or the second receiver, if you want to count Travis Hunter as a receiver, to be taken. Either Golden or someone else will go before him. And the Bengals are going to take a pass rusher, and then they're going to trade Trey Hendrickson by Friday night before the draft. Do you have any reactions to any of those?
I'm not sure how bold the trade. I do think, I think
the trade's not bold. I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. With that, I think that is something that is going to happen. New England, as you laid out, has all of the space in the world to make that kind of move, and it's definitely one that I know they're very interested in because they need help at that position. So I'm not crazy. It's not, the third one is not very hot to me, but Tet, Matthew Golden's stock has risen so much that I'm not buying it in the NFL. I could be wrong because we see fast guys from Texas all the time.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that there's a team that out there that is going to fall or has fallen in love with Tet and is going to take him pretty high.
By the way, if Washington traded back and picked up a third rounder, let's just say, and they had, their second rounder plus the second rounder they got in a trade back, they might be in better position to trade for Trey Hendrickson. Sure. All right. We'll take a 15-minute conversation to talk about the Caps, who just got an absolute stellar performance from Logan Thompson last night. Smoke and Al will join us next. End of the hour, I'll give you 3 Washington draft-related predictions as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're now streaming. We've got the Team 980 YouTube stream up, streaming my show so you can watch it on YouTube if you want. If you go to watch it, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. That's good for us. Big night last night for Logan Thompson. Stopped 25 of 26 shots on goal and was just incredible in the third period when Montreal had a repeat performance from their third period the other night, minus the actual goal scoring. Caps 3-1 winners over Montreal to take a 2-0 series lead. Of course, the series now shifts back to Montreal tomorrow night. Part of the call last night with Joe B and Locker was Al Koken for Monumental Sports. He joins us right now. Of course, you can follow Al on Twitter at RealSmokin'Al. So is it just one of those explanations that is simple? It was goalie last night, why Washington won?
That's one way of putting it, Kevin. I mean, as you said, he was truly outstanding, but they did do enough to get the lead. I thought their response after Montreal jumped on them with the first goal was excellent. They got it within, I think it was literally 2 minutes and 29 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. So that to me was huge, that you just didn't let Montreal hang around with a lead, and then they added right to it. I agree with you, though, the repeat of the third period, I'm not trying to take any credit away from Montreal, because they showed you the talent they've got. They showed you the energy they've got. They showed you the drive and determination they got. But I think much like in that third period of game one, the Caps kind of fueled some of that with some of the giveaways. I think if the Caps were just a little smarter with the puck, if they were a little more, say, stubborn to just dump it in and go bang bodies again, I think they'd be better served by that. I think they've allowed, Montreal to start to believe in themselves with these third periods, and that would be my only concern. Other than that, they held serve, they got the 2-0 lead, and maybe this is going to be the message on the road. Keep it simple, and that may be a better way to get it done.
I'm sorry, too, to start the conversation with hockey, because I know that you really want to talk about a guard that you really think they should take in the 4th or 5th round on Saturday. So we can get to that in a bit.
The one from Moorhead State that I've been talking about on my Twitter.
You've been talking about him forever. I can't believe he's not projected higher, honestly.
Kevin, you watch. You're going to talk to me next year, and you're going to say, Al, you were on him.
You're right.
You were on him all the way.
Moorhead State backup guard. The dude had to come in and play when there were injuries. By the way, speaking of goaltenders, Montreal's goaltender, Sam Montembeault, has been pretty good too, don't you think?
No question about it. I mean, he's been, again, the Caps have had their number these first two periods, and without Montembeault, these third period quote unquote comebacks really would be just more imagined than actually real, because the Capitals would have a 2, 3, 4 goal lead. Yeah. And that was, coming into the series, that was kind of one of the unknowns. You knew the Capitals had advantage in many regards in experience, certainly size and physicality. And we've seen that. I like the way they've used those two weapons to their advantage. You could wear a team down over a 7-game series. I think the players and coaches look at it, not that we're using our size and strength advantage in just this game. They're looking at it, if this thing goes 6 and 7, this is where eventually it's going to take its toll. So the Caps have done really great things there, but you're right. Montembeault has kept this Montreal team in the game to allow them to make these third period rallies or try and stage these rallies. And that was one of the unknowns coming in on the big stage. What would he be like? And much like Logan Thompson, he's a big goaltender who's also got a lot of athleticism to him. And you're going to have to maybe do a little better job of cashing in on some of these rebounds or taking his vision away. Because if you let them get going at home, it could be a different story.
One of the things, and I heard you guys talking about it, whether it was you or Craig or Joe or Alan May or somebody back in studio, the thing that has made an impression on me, and this is kind of the first time watching, Montreal, is just how much bigger the Caps are. And even though Logan Thompson was forced to make some incredible saves last night, it's like Montreal tilted the ice to a certain degree, and yet, with the exception of those 2 amazing saves, the size of Washington seems to be bothering them. Is that something that tell me about if that's a big deal right now in this series?
It's a huge deal, and it's something that coming into the series had to be an advantage the Caps must use. They are built that way. I mean, if you go back to the Stanley Cup team, they had plenty of size on that team as well, and that's something that has been the philosophy from George McPhee to Brian McClellan to now Chris Patrick. Yeah, you're going to get certain smaller players in different spots, but for example, like this, one of the guys they're missing two really key ingredients. Unfortunately, Martin Feravari is going to be gone for the duration of the playoffs, and it's going to, I think Alexeyev has done a nice job stepping in, but we'll see if that takes its toll down the road. But Alexei Protas is a weapon that they don't have at 6'5", and when you watched him during the regular season, he's not the kind of guy, Kevin, that when he gets in on the forecheck is going to try and take you into the 8th row. But what he does do is he uses that body and leans on you. He uses that length of his and the stick length of his to pry pucks free and just to wear you down physically. That's another weapon that could be great for the Capitals if they get him back in this series, because that's how they are built. They're built to be a big, physical, imposing team when they need to be, and that's where you need it, in the playoffs. There's no question about it. That was one of the advantages this team had coming in, and I'm happy to see them use it in these first two games.
Yeah, and the Montreal top line features that guy, Suzuki, but that guy Caulfield, who's tiny.
Oh.
And I just sometimes I can't tell the difference, and it's a random, office skate or whatever. And I understand that Montreal's had two really good third periods in a row, and they could have won game one. And last night they were really pushing for the equalizer and almost had it a couple of times. But it just looks like it's a physical mismatch, especially if that top line for Montreal is really the only one that's truly threatening.
And that's what I said about when you get the turnovers and give them the fuel to start what they do best, which is speed through the neutral zone and then the creativity in their offensive zone. If you just keep them, I know it's impossible to keep them in their own end the entire night, but if you keep them in their own end the majority of the night, and you didn't even mention Lane Hudson, who is maybe 5'9", maybe, but look at the creativity when you give him space and room. Now, when he's got to go, and like on it wasn't his fault, but on Ovi's overtime goal the other night, they got those guys trapped on the ice. Montreal made a mistake. They iced the puck. They claim they didn't, but it happened. So they have a line that was, offensively minded with the young Russian Demidov, with Laine, who, by the way, got benched the entire third period last night, which is going to be a major story in Montreal when we get there later on today. And Hudson also was out there as well. So what did the Capitals do? They put Ovechkin out there with Beauvillier and Strome, and, boom, it goes into the back of the net because they got a physical win of the faceoff. They had Ovi, the monster that he is, barging to the net, and look what happens. The Montreal Canadiens didn't have the weapons to take that away from the Capitals. So, when they use that to their advantage, when they keep a Lane Hudson trying to defend as opposed to attack, that's really the secret to this series. So they got to do a little more of that, quit the turnovers that lets Montreal get that jump. But I agree, 100%. But Caulfield is a dynamic scorer, but you see, only when you have room, if you can lean on him. And I thought the Caps did do a good job of defending last night. They spent more time in the third period defending than they needed to, but there was a lot of times where it looked like, ooh, there's an opening, boom, it got closed off by a bigger Washington Capital player.
Yeah, I thought that one opportunity that Montreal had on the power play, and the Caps actually turned it around and had better opportunities during that power play, was big. You mentioned Beauvillier. Like, this was was he expected to contribute like this after the trade? Because I know he was a trade deadline deal. He's been fabulous in the first two games.
Well, Kevin, one of the things that was commented on when the trade was made, and it was literally one of the greatest under-the-radar trades because there were some big names being wheeled about, and the Capitals didn't get involved in any of it. They had some things they were willing to. My understanding is they were willing to give up their first-round pick if they could be in on the Brock Nelson deal. But when Lou Lamoriello asked for Ryan Leonard, they were like, "You got to be kidding me," and they backed out of it. So they were involved, but Beauvillier, when he was acquired, one of the things that was said about him was, look at what he's done in playoffs past. He's been effective in the playoffs previously, and they looked at him as a versatile guy. You can play him in any of the four lines. And now, because of the injury to Protas, They got him up there on that line with Strome and Ovechkin, and he's been a perfect fit. He, again, is maybe not the biggest guy, but when you watch that speed get in on the forecheck and the creativity, then it's a really good guy to have there. He adds a real element of speed. There's, Ovi's a powerful skater, and Dylan Strome is a magician with the puck, and he's fantastic. But that element of speed on that line to create a little something via the forecheck is really, really important, and he's provided that. It's been a great addition, but his playoff experience was something that the Capitals noted as why they picked him up.
Yeah, we're talking, of course, to Al Koken. Caps up 2-0 in the series. It goes back to Montreal on Friday night. We'll talk about that in a moment. But, bear with me on this because I'm watching really intensely for the first time this year. And I know Ryan Leonard came up just a few weeks ago. But what really strikes me about him, not knowing much about, his college story at Boston College and what the expectations were, the dude is fearless at 19 or 20 years old.
Yep.
Like he acts already like he belongs out there and probably thinks he should be on the ice even longer.
You're 100% right. There was always a swagger to his game. If you watch him at Boston College, he's always the guy that sticks his nose in there. He's always the guy that after the whistle seems to be involved. And he's carried that right over into the National Hockey League, which is impressive. Again, he's a solidly built kid, but he's not a big guy. I mean, he's, in that 6 foot, maybe a hair above that range. So he's not in the Tom Wilson, Lexi Protas, class in terms of pure raw size. But you're right. The willingness to do what he needs to do physically has been very impressive. Without question, last night was, I thought, the best game that he's played since he's gotten to the Capitals. He looked up to NHL speed at everything he was doing. It was going to take a little while to get to speed because as good as you can be in college, it's a whole different animal. And I'm not saying he struggled coming out of the gate, but there were moments you could kind of see, there was kind of like, there's a lesson. I guess I got to get rid of that a little faster. I guess I got to put a little more mustard on that pad. So I think he kind of understood you had to pick up the pace. Last night, his pace was fantastic. He's an excellent skater. His reputation is as a goal scorer. He led college hockey in goals scored. But you can see the playmaking ability. He's really smart with the puck. All up and down the lineup last night in any situation they wanted him in, whether it was on the defensive end or attacking, he was really good. That was definitely his best game. And now if the light has come on now for Ryan Leonard, that's a huge, huge bonus for this Capital team.
Yeah, really, he's actually fun to watch too.
Yeah.
So for just the second time, I believe, in the last 17 games, Alex Ovechkin was held pointless. But 6 more hits last night. He's leading the series, I think, right now in hits. Yep. So I know that there was a point last year coming into this year where it's like, where's the impact going to come if it's not scoring? We're seeing much more than just scoring from Ovechkin, aren't we?
No question. And when you talk to the players about it, it's sort of like, if he's doing it, then we got to do it. If the captain's leading the way, you can't then dodge away from it. You got to get in there. And I think he's always been a lead by example type of captain, right? He's never been a guy that, you're going to say, man, when Ovi had that speech, it's always about follow my lead, boys. And when he feels the team needs something physical, he's the guy who always delivers it. So, yeah, there's always different ways. One of the other things I think is going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out is, as opposed to last year, the addition of a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, a center who you can put out there, and obviously he did a really good job in these first 2 games matching up with the Suzuki line. Yeah. They now have a center that you can say, okay, see that center over there? This is the guy we want you to take out. And he's been terrific all season long at that. They didn't have that last year. As the last time they really had it was a healthy Nick Backstrom who could take that role. So it's something that Spencer Carberry didn't have at his disposal last year. He's got it this year. And playing with Wilson and playing with McMichael, look at what McMichael did last night, with the 2 goals. So there's, the Strome line had the big night in game 1. McMichael with that Dubois and Wilson line had the big night. you're seeing, as we talked about, Leonard playing with Eller and Mangiapane, and then we've seen the consistency of what Nick Dowd's done. So having 4 lines who you can really count on has been huge. That was the factor in 2018, the 3rd and 4th lines, with Lars Eller, ironically, on the 3rd line, and Jay Beagle centering guys like Devontae Smith-Pelly and others on that 4th line. They were the difference makers. And so this now having that balance that you didn't really see last year, I'm going to be fascinated to see how this plays out. Now, Martin St. Louis can try and use the matchups at home to get Suzuki away from Dubois. So that means somebody else is going to have to take that matchup most often. But it does look like there's a little better balance now in this lineup that you won't really get exposed if you say, ooh, they put the Suzuki line against Eller. Well, fine. Lars Eller is capable of that. But it is interesting to see how this is going to match up now in Montreal.
Yeah, I again, I don't know anything about anything, but like you mentioned, Mangiapane, I think that's number 88. Like, I think he's been incredibly active. And then 22, Duhaime, I think it is. Yeah. He's on that last line, right? He's played well.
And that's the balance I'm talking about. So they've got everybody kind of now is situated into their roles. It is going to be interesting. When Protas is available, where do you put him?
Where would he be?
Right now, well, I mean, where he normally would have been is where Beauvillier is. So you would have had Protas up there with Ovechkin and Strome. And that's a fantastic line as well. So where now do you want to disrupt the chemistry there? But then where do you disrupt the chemistry? As we just talked about, all 4 lines are really delivering. And it was interesting. Montreal really only played 3 lines for the most part. Armia and Heineman, didn't get a lot of time, where Spencer Carberry was pretty consistent with getting his 4 lines out there, which again can be a factor as this series goes on. But if Protas is available and he's been skating, I don't know, what he's going to do today, but if they can get him back in this series, it's something you want, but it's going to be interesting to see how they balance that out now. Who basically doesn't get in, because as we just talked about, there haven't been any passengers on any of these forward lines.
All right. They go to Montreal for game 3 on Friday night, game 4 on Sunday. I've heard this, and I'm going to ask you. This place, especially since they have not seen a playoff game in a while. When they were in the finals during COVID, they were only allowed 3,500 fans into the arena. So how good is that place, and how loud and how raucous is it? Will it be insane Friday night, tomorrow night?
It's phenomenal, Kevin. It's one of the largest buildings, if not the largest building. So you've got the advantage of having a few thousand extra fans in there, and they make themselves known. But it is a place, and I've seen it when it starts out just like insane bedlam, loud craziness, and then 1 goal gets in, 2 goals gets in, a 3rd goal gets in, and suddenly you're in a museum. I mean, they can be taken out of it, but when they're in it, they are truly a factor. It is going to be insane. It's as hockey crazy as you can find. And as you mentioned, the lack of being in for a playoff for so many of these fans is going to make it even more special. But, the Caps, I've seen the Caps play some really disciplined, button-down road games this year where they just come in, they keep it simple, they just grind you out, they take care of their opportunities. And if they can play that type of game, the crowd can be taken out of it. But if you let the crowd fuel up that team and let them get off to the type of start that they haven't really had, but they've had in the games they've had in the 3rd period, if they carry their 3rd period games into the 1st period, that's going to be a really difficult task, because then the crowd is just going to fuel them even more.
Is Montreal's fan base the number 1 most passionate fan base in the NHL?
It's tough to say, because I mean, you look at what's going on, like when they have the cutaways of outside
Toronto.
Of the arena in Toronto, and you see, I mean, that's insane too, right? So in terms of a fan base, I just don't know if it's even crazier than Toronto, for example, but it's got to be up there, and the way they crank it up in that building. The noise, the ole, ole, oles, it's unique. And also too, the mixture of English and French makes it unique as well. I mean, it's something that's fascinating when you hear the Canadian national anthem in both languages, and the public address announcer announcing things in both languages. I mean, it creates a different and more a unique environment. But I would say, Montreal, Toronto, in terms of just the overall amount of fans and the passion and the living and dying every day, even in the off season. There's no question. I mean, it is the number one. I don't care what the Blue Jays do. I don't care what the Alouettes do. There's no question. It's the Maple Leafs and the Canadians, 365, 24/7.
All right. Merci beaucoup, Smoking Al.
Yes,
nicely done. We'll talk Moorhead State guards and special teamers maybe on Saturday.
Long snapper.
On Saturday show.
You got to get a long snapper. Get a long snapper, man. Trade up. Never fails. Never fails.
Thank you for doing it. Hey, thanks for getting up. Really appreciate it.
Kevin, you cut it in my sleep time, man, but only for you, my friend. Only
you and Buck. You and Buck, basically, anything before noon is like, you're cranky the rest of the day.
No.
All right.
That's right. No.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
You got it, pal. All right, Kev.
Al Koken, everybody. I've got some Washington draft predictions next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Sorry about that, everybody. I was getting off the phone with Al Koken. All right. Last night, the Washington Capitals had an impressive win. Logan Thompson led them to a 3-1 victory. He made some impressive saves down the stretch. He saved 25 of 26, including all 14 shots in the third period. He posted a .962 save percentage. Caps take a 2-0 lead. They will continue their series on Friday night. Pregame at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. The Nats got off to a hot start last night, putting up 3 runs in the first inning. James Wood hit a 430-foot bomb to right center, quickly followed by a Josh Bell 2-run jack. They win 4-3. They're going for the sweep tonight on 106.7 The Fan. And tonight is the night. The NFL draft is upon us. Coverage begins on the Team 980 at 4 p.m. with Craig Hoffman's show. And then at 8 p.m., Toby Altizer and Linnell Willingham will take you all the way to 1 a.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
With the second pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select Jaden Daniels, quarterback, LSU.
A year ago tomorrow night, actually, because it was the 25th of April last year in Detroit. But that was the selection 1 year ago, and it'll be a selection, I think, after one season that we will remember for a long time, especially when you consider in terms of recent drafts, they got this one right in a major way. I mean, what a rookie season Jaden Daniels had. You know, the build up to the draft last year was Caleb, Jaden, Drake May. It was pretty much, you know, a given really after the Super Bowl and as we started to build towards the draft that Chicago was going to take Caleb Williams, number 1 overall. And so, you know, the evolution of the debate and the conversation went from, is it Jaden Daniels? Is it Drake May? A lot of people started to like J.J. McCarthy. There was a belief that a lot of people might like J.J. McCarthy enough that he could go as high as number 2. And then as more and more people got into the process, and I talked a lot about this last year, that a lot of the NFL people don't watch a lot of college football until the NFL season is over. And then once they start to really delve into it, you start to get opinions that sort of change or are formalized. And what became pretty clear to everybody as we got into March is that Jaden Daniels was either the best quarterback in the draft, but certainly no worse than the second quarterback in the draft. Now, there were a lot of Drake May people out there for sure. And look, in our own fan base, there were a lot of, you know, trade back, pick offensive linemen, pick defensive linemen, keep Sam. But this was never, ever a question, thankfully, within the organization. The minute, you know, Adam Peters said he turned on the tape for the first time, he said Jaden Daniels was his guy. And this was not just an after the pick sentiment. Trust me, because in talking to people during and then afterwards, the organization as a whole was all bought in, from the scouts to the front office to the analytics people. Everybody said this is a no-brainer. And Adam Peters went a step further, saying that if they had had the first pick overall, they would have selected Jaden Daniels. I don't think he needed to say that, but to emphasize how much they loved the player, he talked about that. This was organizational. There were, from my sources, going back to last year, there was literally no pushback from anywhere in the organization. Everybody, ownership, coach, GM, everybody in the front office, scouts, the analytics and the research group, everybody said, this is the guy. And this is the guy by a lot. And, you know, it's only one season. And there were 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12 picks last year. And Bo Nix had a pretty good season. And Michael Penix Jr. in his brief, you know, play at the end of the year looked a little bit like the part. Drake May certainly looked the part by the time we got to the end of the year. Caleb Williams had a tough first year. There's a lot of reasons for it, including the dysfunctional situation that he was put in from a coaching staff and from an organizational standpoint. They had some talent on the team. We'll see what happens with Ben Johnson as his head coach. And of course, J.J. McCarthy never had the chance because he got injured in training camp. But it would be hard to believe that 10 years from now, we don't look back and think that at the very least, Jaden was either the best or in the top 2 quarterbacks that were taken. I still would never give up on Caleb Williams at this point. There's just too much talent. And I do think Penix Jr. has a massive upside. But they got a guy, knock on wood, he stays healthy, because that seems to be the biggest and only thing that could stop him. They got the guy that they've been trying to get for decades. And it makes this year and the years that follow much easier this time of year. But also more interesting because there's so many potential players to pick from. 1 year ago, tomorrow night, April 25th, Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall in the 2024 draft to Washington. All right, when we come back, I've got Washington-related predictions. I'll give you my thoughts on the corners in this draft, and then we will get to our predictions on who Washington selects in the first round. Craig and Chris are going to jump on with me at the end of this hour. We'll get their predictions as well, talk draft with them. Ben put out his final mock draft. He'll join us at 12. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, we are now sponsored by our Team 980 YouTube page. You can see us streaming this show on the Team 980 YouTube page. Open the app, open the Odyssey app, type in Team 980, hit the subscribe button for us, and also like the show for us as well. All right, a couple of predictions for the Washington draft. I'm going to go through the corners, and then Max and I are going to make our predictions this hour. Chris and Craig will jump on with us at about 11:40. So I talked about some of the bold predictions on the NFL draft. Two of them were bold. Only one quarterback goes in the first round. That may be a reach, but the over under is 2.5. So if it's just Cam Ward, that would be a surprise to the odds makers anyway. I just don't see the other guys as starters. Will somebody that hasn't mattered in the past? Remember, in 2022, we got the Kenny Pickett as the only player, and no quarterback went until the third round after that. Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, etc. Sam Howell went in the fifth round. There are precedents for people saying, don't love the quarterbacks. Don't see it. Because Malik Willis that year and even Desmond Ridder, they were getting first round, looks. Remember, Sam Howell the year before was a projected first round pick. I just don't like the quarterbacks other than Cam Ward. I am a Cam Ward fan. Not everybody is. A lot of people I've heard say that he would have been the seventh quarterback taken in the first round last year after Bo Nix. I think he would have been the sixth or the fifth in last year's draft. But I like Cam Ward. I think Tennessee's got a shot. You never know. These are, not necessarily coin flips, but actually less than coin flip, kind of discussions when it comes to drafted players. I said that Tet McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, would not be the first receiver taken in the draft. Taking Travis Hunter out of the conversation, I think somebody like Matt Golden or even Luther Burden could get picked before him. And the other bold NFL prediction was that the Bengals take a pass rusher at 17, and then they trade Trey Hendrickson for a second and a third rounder to New England. So I think their price will come down a bit. What does that mean for Washington? It means they might have a shot. The problem is New England's got more dry powder in terms of picks. They've got a second, they've got 2 third rounders. Now, the Bengals might prefer to trade Trey Hendrickson to an NFC team, but I think trading Hendrickson to New England in the AFC East for a second and a third makes sense. If they end up taking a pass rusher, somebody like Mike Green makes sense to me. Green's going to be an interesting guy tonight, as will Pierce out of Tennessee, because of the red flag character issues. If you start to see Mike Green fall much beyond, say, Cincinnati at 17, they've learned something about him that isn't good. And then you're talking about teams, hoping at the end that they get the talent and not the other stuff with it. I think Pierce is off some lists here. I'd be surprised if Washington took him. All right. Here are three predictions related specifically to Washington's draft. So my first prediction is this. Because I predicted only one quarterback would be taken in the first round, that means nobody's trading into the end of the first round to take a quarterback. So the first prediction, and it's not bold, I understand that, Washington's not going to trade back. They're not going to be able to trade back. I still think that's the best case scenario for Washington tonight because who did we have on the show that also mentioned this? But I talked about this a little bit over the last week, that this draft is very, very top heavy. Maybe with Carter, with, Travis Hunter, with Will Campbell. But after that, picks 5 through 60, there's going to be a lot of, mocks that are just off because there's not a lot of difference between these players. So it would be better for Washington to trade back, pick up an early second, maybe, something else in the third or fourth round, and take more players in a draft like this. But my first Washington draft prediction of the for tonight is that they won't trade back. They'll end up taking a player at 29. My second Washington prediction is that the only pass rusher, the only edge defensive end that they will select, if he's there, is Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. He's the one that I think they really like. I mentioned earlier in the week when we talked about some of the defensive ends and edges that he is a pass rusher only right now. At 245, 250, he's not an edge-setting run stopper. I'm not saying that he can't develop into that because he's a smart kid. He's athletic as hell. But as a pass rusher, he's dynamic. And he's got quick twitch. People have called him Gumby because of his bendability. He is a pass rusher. And I think if Washington is on the clock and he is still available, that will be the pick. And by the way, when I say he's the only edge rusher defensive end they would take, that is based on the players that are projected to potentially be there at 29. Okay, Abdul Carter is not going to be there at 29. I'm not counting him. All right. So of the projected mid to late first round guys, if they were to fall to 29, and let's just say, there's a group of guys at 29 in this draft that are edge rushers that include Ezerako and maybe a Shamar Stewart, maybe a Pierce Jr. That's the one they'll take. If he's not there, they don't take an edge or a defensive end at 29. Okay, so that's prediction number 2, that Ezeraku is the only guy at that position that they will take at 29. Again, not including some of the great players at that position that will go earlier, much earlier. And then the third is this, because it dovetails off of number 2. They're not going to take an edge defensive end because Ezeraku won't be there at 29. He will be gone. He will go to somebody else, maybe Cincinnati at 17 if Mike Green's off the board. So I see Washington taking tonight, because Ezeraku will be off the board, a corner or an offensive lineman. I don't see them taking an edge defensive end at 29. That's the third prediction. Again, it's because of the Boston College pass rusher I think won't be there. I'm saying corner or offensive lineman because I think that it's very possible that would be a BPA, a best player available situation for them. I think there will be corners there at 29 that make sense. If you're following the draft, that a best player available would be, and we'll get into the corners here shortly, would be a corner. It's possible an offensive lineman. I don't see Tyler Booker dropping to 29, but if he did, I think they would run to the podium with the pick. I've mentioned some of the other edge defensive ends that I really like, but they're mostly guys projected second round, like a JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. That dude, if they took him at 29, I'd actually be really excited about the player. I just think that if they love him, they might think they can get him in the second round, and that he wouldn't be best player available. A corner or an offensive lineman might be. A Landon Jackson from Arkansas from that position. But again, I think if it's not Ezeraku, it's something else other than edge defensive end. And let me just mention, I don't think it's impossible that Washington selects Trevion Henderson from Ohio State, the running back. For me, I don't think a running back other than Genty in the first round is good value, but there is something special about Henderson as a player. He's got the best home run potential of the running backs in the draft. He's also apparently top shelf as a player, smart, great teammate, etc. And there is something attractive about envisioning Trevion Henderson standing up next to Jaden Daniels in the pistol or in the shotgun, or directly behind him in the pistol. Like, zone reads, draws, screens. This guy is a guy that every time he's in the game, it could go from the 20 to the end zone easily. I would prefer Henderson. If you told me they take a running back in the first round, I would hope that it was Henderson more than it was Hampton. That's just me. Egbuka from Ohio State is a wide receiver that a lot of people have mocked to Washington at 29. I don't think they're taking a wide receiver at 29. I think they actually like their receivers right now. I think they brought Noah Brown back. I think they, obviously added Debo. They've got Terry. They've got, a guy like Luke McCaffrey, who, by the way, got open when he played last year, and he got a lot of snaps, which tells you that they liked him last year. Even though the production wasn't there, it wasn't necessarily his fault. The quarterback just didn't go in his direction. Egbuka, to me, is going to be a really solid number 2 receiver in the NFL. Nothing wrong with that. But I think at 29, given where they are, they should be looking to get a player, to land a player that has big-time upside, like star upside. I mean, Ezeraku has star pass rushing ability. So, there's some corners potentially at 29 that have real high, ceilings. Egbuka's got a high floor. He's not Smith-Njigba. Smith-Njigba was a better prospect. The truth is, he's probably just a slightly better prospect than Terry was, and Terry went in the 3rd round. I shouldn't say that. Egbuka as a prospect is a better prospect than Terry. His production at Ohio State is unbelievable, until Jeremiah Smith breaks all of his records. But I always get, with Ohio State offensive skill position players, just a little bit concerned because everybody's always open and there's always a lot of green grass to run to. Let me just also mention tight end, because a guy like Mason Taylor, Jaden's teammate at LSU for 2 years, more and more you're seeing Mason Taylor mocked into the late 1st round. I've seen him mocked to Philadelphia now a couple of times because Goddard is 30 plus and is in his last year of the deal, I think. Could Mason Taylor be a pick? It would tell you what they think of Sinnott to a certain degree, right? But could he be the best player available on their board at 29? He might be. But I think more likely than not, it's a Hairston from Kentucky, a Barron from Texas, more on him coming up, a Josh Connerly from Oregon, a Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, that ends up being, more likely than not available to them if the pick isn't Boston College edge defensive end Donovan Ezeraku. All right, so those are the 3 predictions. They're not going to trade back. The only edge rusher of the group that might fall to them would be the BC defensive end Ezeraku that they would take. Other than that, and I don't think he will be there at 29, they don't take an edge defensive end. That's the 3rd prediction, and that it ends up being a corner or an offensive lineman at 29. Henderson wouldn't shock me. Egbuka would. Mason Taylor wouldn't shock me. But I bet if it's not the BC defensive end, it ends up being a corner or an offensive lineman at 29. All right, real quickly, because I've done running backs, defensive end, edges, and yesterday focused on wide receivers. So the corners in this draft, there is a corner I absolutely love who's not a projected 1st-round pick. More on him in a moment. Will Hunter, to me, is the best corner in this draft in terms of just being a guy that's going to play corner, because Travis Hunter, we don't know what he's going to play. He might play both. I think that, for him, playing wide receiver makes the most sense in terms of his financial earnings potential. Will Johnson, Michigan, is an absolute baller. To me, the best corner in the draft. And, yeah, there were injuries. He's not going to be available to Washington. There's no chance he makes it past the top half of this draft. After that, I do like Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. He ran a 4.28 at the combine. I kind of like Trey Amos from Ole Miss. Ravel from East Carolina is kind of freakish too. He's been mocked to Washington. I've seen a couple of times. But the 2 guys that actually Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, I like a lot. And he just seems like a Washington pick. He's just had some real injuries here. This guy, unfortunately, has had surgeries on shoulder and I think hip, which disrupted his junior season. So I love Benjamin Morrison, though, from Notre Dame. Like, he is a really good player. And by the way, cut straight from the Washington, cloth, in that this is a loyal teammate, a team captain. Like, everybody loves him. He's super smart, the whole thing. But the two guys that I really like a lot, I like Barron from Texas, and then I really like Darian Porter from Iowa State, who is a projected night 2 pick or maybe even a day 3 pick. That makes no sense to me. First on Barron from Texas. This dude is so smart, so versatile, led the SEC in interceptions, led the SEC in defended passes, won the Jim Thorpe Award as the nation's top defensive back. He's incredibly high IQ as a player. The one thing you would say about him, because he plays every position all over the field. I mean, he plays in the slot. He plays on the outside. He'll play safety for you if you need him to play safety. The one thing, play special teams, the one thing that you would say about him is that he's not that big. You know, he's like 5'10", 5'9", 190, something like that. Doesn't have super long arms, which you like to see in corners. But he runs. He ran sub 440, 4.4, and it shows up on the field. I think that this guy, because of his IQ and his versatility, is a real possibility if he's there at 29. And then the guy, kind of like I mentioned, Kyle Williams is the receiver that I kind of fell in love with from Washington State. This guy, I had a friend of mine just text me. He said, just spend a little bit of time watching Darian Porter from Iowa State. He started 1 season at Iowa State and only 8 games as a corner. You have to wonder, well, what took him so long to put this dude in the game as a cornerback? So there's that. He wears number 10. If you look up his highlights, he is 6'3". He is long-armed. He ran 4.3 something at the 40. He has great feel and timing, you know, along with the speed and the height and the length. I mean, he can smother receivers. It's a rare combination of height, speed, and long arms. And by the way, aggressive, decisive play in zone or man. I don't really even know what the downsides would be to him other than he didn't play much. Why wasn't he playing? I don't really understand that necessarily. As a starter, he was playing a lot, but as a starter, it's just 1 year starter as a corner, and I think it was really only like 8 of the games. Even though he played in games, you know, played all over and played special teams, he was more of a special teams player. This is another reason I could see them really liking Darian Porter. But the dude is like physically like so tall and long and aggressive and smart. He's like, you know, I guess the other knock on him, you know, and I wrote this down in my notes, is that he's 24 going on 25. Okay. I don't mind that with quarterbacks, by the way. Like, you know, quarterbacks play until they're, you know, they don't hit their stride until their mid-30s sometimes or early 30s. So maybe you know, would like to have a guy for 10 years and he's not a guy who's going to turn 25 years old that you're going to have for 10 years. But man, he just looks ready to play now. Oh, the other thing too, special teams wise, because he plays a lot of special teams. He had 5 blocked kicks during his college career, 4 punts and a field goal. He'll be all over the field as a special teamer, and I think he looks like a starting corner in the NFL. He does to me anyway. Again, why didn't he play until this last year? Why didn't he play until he became 24 years old? I don't know. But the tape is one of those where it's like, this guy should be picked a lot higher than the end of the 3rd round or the 4th round. So there you go on the corners. Will Johnson, I think, is the star of this class, but I think guys like Hairston and Amos and Ravel and Barron are possibilities for Washington, especially if a guy like Ezeraku's not there. All right, we'll come back. Max and I will make our Washington first-round prediction for tonight's draft. Chris and Craig will jump on with us after that. We'll get their predictions. They will be Draft heavy all day as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the team980.com. All right, time to give our predictions for the draft tonight. Washington on the clock at 29 currently. Will they stay there? And who will they pick? Max is going to make his pick first. Then I will do it. Then Chris and Craig will jump on and we'll talk draft and they'll give their predictions as well. So, Max, go ahead. I know you've given a lot of thought to this. You've studied it very hard. What are they going to do tonight at 29? Or will they stay at 29?
See, that's the thing. I'm going to just keep banking on Joe Shane and the Giants just being dumb. I really think Adam Peters has shown he hasn't been afraid to trade with teams in division. So I really could see the Giants taking Abdul Carter at 3 and then wanting to get back into the first round to have a little bit more control. I think they will trade back with the Giants, and the Giants will probably take Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck with that 29th pick.
Okay. But you got to have a pick now for the Giants at what, 34?
Yes. So
is that where it is? 34?
Yes, I believe so. Let me quickly check Tankathon. Yes, 34. Yeah. So that is where it gets a little tricky. I'm not sure who's going to be there. I like Ezeraku, but I don't think he'll be there in the second round. Hairston might be there. So that's, if he's there in the top of the second, I would love Maxwell Hairston to be Washington Commander because he's so fast. That would set up our corner room for the next, 2-3 seasons. I think they would be, much better off with Maxwell Hairston in that room.
All right. Time to give our predictions for the draft tonight. Washington on the clock at 29 currently. Will they stay there? And who will they pick? Max is going to make his pick first. Then I will do it. Then Chris and Craig will jump on and we'll talk draft and they'll give their predictions as well. So, Max, go ahead. I know you've given a lot of thought to this. You've studied it very hard. What are they going to do tonight at 29? So you got a corner, Maxwell
Yep.
Hairston.
Maxwell Hairston. Max is picking Max.
Dude just could fly. I like him as a corner. So I think they're going to pick at 29 for the reasons that I've stated. I also think it would be interesting if the Giants called Washington to trade. Would Washington give them a quarterback that they wanted in the first round? I don't think they should worry about it, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not because I think Joe Shane's an idiot. I still think that the Saquon Barkley thing is such an interesting conversation because it was perfect for him in Philadelphia, but would it have been perfect for him on that team in New York? Maybe not. Anyway, that's digressing from the topic at hand. So, look, I see a first round that ends up, seeing a lot of the possibilities of edge pass rusher gone. Like, it will not shock me at all if Donovan Azaruko, the edge rusher from Boston College, goes as high as, say, 17 to Cincinnati, and then watching, other guys come off the board well in advance of Washington selecting at 29. Any of those guys, Mikael Williams, any of the guys that might be possibilities, I think they're all gone at that point. And I think Washington has to settle for a corner or an offensive lineman. When I say settle, I don't mean settle. I just think that will be the position group that will be the best player available on the board. I don't think there are going to be offers from, a Cleveland or a Giants to come back into the first round, or even a Pittsburgh or a New Orleans if they don't take a quarterback in the first round. I think they make the pick at 29. I hope, by the way, you're right. And by the way, if they got to trade back and still got Maxwell Hairston, that'd be awesome. What'd you say?
It'd be a coup.
Yeah. Let me just tell you that if Tyler Booker, the guard, is available at 29, that's who they're going to take. But I think he'll be gone. I don't see them taking Hampton. I could see them taking Henderson. But by the way, it's possible that both of those guys are gone by the time Washington picks. Seriously. So I come down to, who do I think would be the player that they have fallen in love with, and at the same time, talent-wise, would be the best player available on their board at 29. This might be a reach to expect him to be on the board at 29. But I think number 7, the corner from Texas, Zade Barron, is the pick at 29. This guy meets all of the Washington, kind of requirements. He is a really good player. He is a super smart player. He's very, very versatile. All that gets talked about Barron when they discuss him is his football IQ, which is one of the reasons he's able to play a lot of different positions. I think he's more of an outside corner than he is an inside corner, but he's played all over the place. He's played in a lot of zone-heavy schemes for sure, but he's played corner, outside, inside. He's played safety, in the box safety. This guy is such a versatile player, and he's a playmaker. Led the SEC in interceptions, led the SEC in passes defended, had big-time games. Look, they had some big games. Texas did on the schedule this year, right? They played Georgia early in the year. In that game, he had 2 interceptions in that game against Georgia and Carson Beck. Just all over the field. They ended up losing that game, if you recall, that big Saturday night game back in October. He played exceptionally well in their SEC championship win, lost to Georgia in overtime. Remember that game in the rematch? Had an interception in that game. Led the team, or was close to leading the team in tackles in their playoff win over Arizona State. This guy lacks some of the athletic stuff. That's the thing that you have to wonder about Barron from Texas, is he's barely 5'11". He's barely 190 pounds. He doesn't have long arms. In fact, he's got shorter arms. But what makes up for it is his incredible IQ, his anticipation, his ability to kind of read the situation. He's always around the ball. Like, he had a fumble return in that game against Georgia. He's picked up block punts. He plays special teams. I think that he's the guy that he might look there. I've seen him mocked as high as to the Jets in the top 10, but assuming Ezeraku isn't there, because I think he would be the pick, I'm going with Jahdae Barron, corner, Texas, at 29. I'd be thrilled with the pick, and it would be a best player available because, they have Marshawn Lattimore. They've got Sandra still. They brought back Noah I. They added Jonathan Jones. But I think if the pass rusher edge that they want isn't there, it's corner or offensive lineman. And I think Barron would be the best player on their board if he's there at 29. That's my prediction. You've got a corner. I've got a corner. I hope, by the way, that it would not be an indication that they are concerned about Marshawn Lattimore.
You would hope.
Craig Hoffman, Chris Russell, my 980 cohorts will join me next. We'll talk draft and we'll get their predictions on what Washington does tonight when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, last night, Logan Thompson led the Washington Capitals to a 3-1 victory over Montreal to take a 2-0 series lead. He posted a .962 save percentage, saving all 14 shots faced in the third period. Connor McMichael had 2 goals, and Stromer with the game winner to put the Caps up 2-1 in the second. Series will continue in Montreal. They will drop the puck tomorrow night, pregame at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. Nats got off to a hot start last night with 3 runs in the first inning. James Wood hit a 431-foot rocket to right center, quickly followed by a Josh Bell 2-run bomb. They win 4-3. They're going for the sweep tonight on 106.7 The Fan. And tonight is the night the NFL draft is upon us. Coverage will begin on the Team 980 with starting with Craig Hoffman at 4 p.m. for his NFL draft special. Then Toby Altizer and Linnell Willingham will take you all the way up to 1 a.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1. Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Coverage all day here on the Team 980, leading up to Linnell and Toby's draft show from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. Craig's going to take his show all the way up until 8 o'clock. Chris is on after me, and both of those gentlemen join me right now. It is one of those days where it's just interesting to see what everybody's thinking on draft day. It's different, guys, from it was a year ago when we pretty much knew at this point who it was going to be, which actually is where I'll start. Don't you think that this draft, given that they're taking the latest they've ever taken with their own pick ever in franchise history, because the last time they were this good, there were only 28 teams in the league. But don't you think in preparation for your shows to be able to talk draft even somewhat fluently, it is just so much deeper and more difficult because there are so many possibilities? Craig, you go first.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been way more difficult. Last year, I mean, really, we knew pretty early Jaden was probably the pick, but you just had to be prepared on Drake May, JJ McCarthy. Is there maybe one or two other guys that could come into it? Sure, but it was basically if you had a good file on those people, you were set. This year, I keep seeing new names. Now, like, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, let me go look at Jahdae Barron a little bit more, because in his mock draft last night, Daniel Jeremiah's got Jahdae Barron falling all the way down to 29.
Jeremiah had him?
Yeah.
Because that was my pick.
Yeah, like, I could see that. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys that, like, this week, Omarion Hampton, like, could he be available? So there's kind of the non-positions that we've talked about, also different guys at the edge spot. Like, I got to know 7 different edges. Because all of them could be available, and it's not just Washington picking the slate. It is the contour of this draft class, and it's made it very difficult, but also very fun in its own way.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me, I think we all identify edge pass rusher as probably the top need, right? I think that's pretty commonly known. But what isn't known is, A, how much of a desire they have to trade back. B, is there going to be a pool of 3 or 4 of those 7 or 8 candidates that Hoffman was just talking about that are there so that it makes sense to trade back? Or do you feel like, okay, I've got to go now because a guy might not be there if, say, I drop, 33, 34, or even 40 with New Orleans, which is the scenario that I floated the other day on the show. So I think that has made it hard for me. And then in addition to that, okay, do they decide to go running back? Do they decide to go cornerback? Do they go wide receiver? Do they go interior offensive line, which I got to be honest with you guys, I haven't spent a lot of time studying or thinking about. But now all of a sudden you're starting to hear the kid from North Dakota State and a couple of others that everybody's high on and certainly could very much be as part of that 29 mix.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities. Let me ask both of you, what player, if that player were to drop, and I'm not talking about Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or any of the players that are clearly at the top of this draft, but who would they not pass on? What would be their dream situation tonight with a player dropping to 29 if that's where they pick?
I'll go first here. I personally, the one that jumps out for me is Ashton Genty, but I don't think that's going to happen.
You discount the players that are clearly going to be gone.
Right. So I would say for me, I believe if Will Johnson from Michigan is still there, I think they have a hard time passing on. But as Craig just mentioned, Jahdae Barron from Texas, he did fall in Jeremiah's mock draft, and I was curious about that because I've seen a lot of top 10 selections about him. I mean, if they feel the same way, obviously, and they have let's just say a top 15 grade, how do you turn that down at a neat position still for the future and somebody that can help you now? And if you had a top 15 grade, there's no way. And then it becomes even more complicated because, again, if say that scenario happens and you have a top 15 grade on a guy and he's there at 29, Do you trade down because that's the prudent thing to do? Or do you just say, you know what? We can't resist the value.
I think at that point you say you can't resist the value. The problem, the thing is though, like you can name any player in this draft. And I would say even including Carter, Hunter, Genty, I can give you a reason why it's a bad idea. Like that is this class. This class has 5 or 6 guys where that weaknesses list is very, very small. And obviously Carter, Genty, etc. It's pretty small there. But I could tell you why Malachi Starks is a great idea. I could tell you why it's a bad idea. Jahdae Barron. Like you pick your guy, Matthew Golden. I talked to someone within the last week that's like, when I saw him during the year, I thought he was a 3rd, 4th round guy. You have other people that think he's the best receiver in this class. The valuations are so different that I could tell you certainly Will Johnson was the first name that came to mind for me as well. And I do think he could be available, which a week ago I would have told you you're on crazy pills. But I do think that there's the foot. I think there's some other stuff he didn't test at all. And to say other stuff, I think other injury stuff that concerns people. But at 29, like, what are you waiting for? Like, go do that. Shamar Stewart, Donovan Ezra, like, you name a guy, I can tell you why it's a great idea. I can tell you why it's a bad idea, which is kind of a cop-out answer, Kevin, but it is the truth about this draft class.
Yeah, the Will Johnson thing, if he's available, there are a couple of guys that I'm sorry, but if they're available at 29, there is something drastically wrong. With him, it would be the injuries, clearly, that there's something of major concern. I think like, a Pierce or a Green, if Green were to fall to 29, then the due diligence has unveiled something about him that Washington would likely pass on to. That's just my guess. Because you're right. This draft, I would say 5 through 60, there are, pluses and minuses, and everybody's got a different opinion on. I don't know if people have, at this point, a different opinion on the top 2 or 3 guys or 4 guys. I think Genty's in that group. But anyway, what would surprise you, Craig, you first? What would shock you if they stayed at 29 and took this player?
A quarterback, like outside of that,
outside of quarterback,
I don't have
and long snapper,
an answer. Yeah, kicker, punter, we can throw those in too. Like it's hard, man, because I have seen and done myself. Like I've done like 8 or 9 mocks at this point. We got another one in the 4 o'clock hour today on our show, and I've just seen too many things fall. I would say. I would be kind of surprised if there's a tackle at 29, because I think that either like Josh Simmons' injury stuff is bad enough that you don't want him and he's available, or the good ones are going to go. I've heard Kelvin Banks. I mean, now this is out there. Like he could go as high as 6. Right. And I've talked to people who think like that's deserving. I've talked to people that think he's in the teens. I've talked to people that think he's a guard and belongs in the 20s. But I think tackle would surprise me at 29, because I just don't see how the best player on their board at 29 is a tackle worth taking. That I would say that. And by the way, I think as much as a lot of people think that Brandon Coleman should be a guard, they've said he's a tackle, and I think we should believe them.
By the way, Banks is another name. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, Kev. No, I didn't mean to talk over. I'll go in general offensive line. I mentioned the guards earlier, and I agree with what Craig just said. I'll just give you one different that for me, I don't know if I would love, and it would kind of surprise me if he went this early, is Trevion Henderson. I understand what kind of breakaway speed he has. I understand they don't have that profile. I don't know, and Kevin and Craig, you would know better than me, I don't know if I see him as even a 15 to 18 carry type of guy, and I need somebody, moving forward beyond just not only this year, but with all 4 running backs being on the final year of each one of their deals, and certainly the top 2 having, I would say, significant injury concerns. I need somebody that can carry the ball more regularly than just being a 3rd down and spot 1st and 2nd down type guy, which is how I kind of view Trevion Henderson. That's not to say he can't play on 1st and 2nd down. I just don't know if he's the bell cow, if you will. And I understand you don't want 3 yards in a cloud of dust bell cow anymore. I get it. But you guys know what I mean. Can he be asked to have the breakaway speed, the explosiveness, the pass catching ability, pass pro, and also carry the ball, say, 15 to 17 times with a bunch of those carries coming between the tackles.
Pass pro, yes, and everything else, yes. But I agree with you. I don't think he's a 20-plus carry a back game. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I think that he is a really, really high-end version of a piece that's really, really valuable in the NFL, and specifically in this offense. But do you want a part-time starter with your first-round pick? And I would say the answer is no, especially when there is incredible depth at that position in this draft. And the other part of this that we should talk about probably more is the contract value. Like, the most expensive running back in the league is now making $15 million a year.
Yeah.
The discount you get for taking a first-round running back is not that steep compared to wide receiver, edge, quarterback, etc.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, I wanted to mention one thing real quickly because you guys who were talking about O-line would be a surprise. I don't think he'll be there, but I think if Tyler Booker dropped to 29, they would race up with that as their pick. And I've also heard in the last 24 hours that Banks is is closing in as a close second if you consider him a guard. All right, so let's get to prediction time. I don't know if you guys have done this already on your show. I just did it. This is a bit of a reach to expect him to be available, but I went Jahdae Barron from Texas. I think the short arms, the height, there's a possibility that ends up being the reason he's available. And I don't think Ezeraku will be there at 29. And I think he would be the pick if he were there at 29. That's why I went Barron. You guys give me your pick and the logic behind it. Chris, you go first.
All right, so maybe I guess I'm stealing a little bit from what I did for Craig on a different feature, but I'm going to go if he's there, of course, and I don't know if he will because of how he did at the combine and all that. Shamar Stewart, I look at him as a high upside, higher ceiling type guy, really good against the run. I think sideline to sideline he can chase. I think backside pursuit was a strength that jumped out to me. I think he's still developing, still learning how to finish, and hopefully this coaching staff between Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. and Ryan Kerrigan and so on and so forth can figure out a way to unlock that next step, that next level. I love the athleticism, of course. We all know they love the athleticism, and I think he's a little bit underrated as a football player all around, as opposed to Ezeraku, who is more of a pass rusher. So I'm going to go with Shamar Stewart.
All right, Craig.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I agree with everything Chris Russell just said. Stewart is so underrated because people think that he's just like an athlete out there running around. It's like, no, his sack production's bad, but he does a bunch of other stuff well, which is why I think there's no shot he's going to be there the more I think about it. But if he is, I think you're right, Chris. They run to the podium and take him. And then I say there's no shot he's going to be there, so let me pick someone else. I'm going to pick a guy that has been mocked in the top 10 for most of this process, but I think Will Johnson's going to fall. And I think they would have a really hard time looking at outside corner. They know the program, obviously, with Mikey being the pick last year. His character and all that stuff is really, really high. I think he gets the Commander's tag. It's just a matter of the injury. And if he falls that far, I think you can make the argument that you go, there's a reason he's fallen this far injuries. That's a risk. But at 29, if you're getting a top 15 talent, I think you just take that risk and you do it. So I'll go Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan, which basically until yesterday, I would have never thought was remotely a possibility for them.
But don't you think
if he fell to 20, we didn't compare notes.
if he fell to 29, there would be it would be all about his physical health. There'd be no other reason.
Yeah, but I think you also have to. I think there's a couple factors that you have to then factor in, which is if you're a GM and a coach, you have job security. And, outside of Howie Roseman, and even with Howie Roseman, the way that Lurie and the Eagles have operated sometimes, but Howie seems to be the Don there. Like, is there a coach, GM combo with more job security in the NFL right now?
Wow. Is that sounds like a segment. Maybe you did it, but that's crazy to say. When you just said that, I'm like, oh my God. Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have the most job security of any team in the NFL. That's probably not true. I would think Andy Reid and the Kansas City situation has a lot of security. But that's probably,
but like
that's
I'd
such
say they're
a change.
Tied. Like them, Howie would feel like there's a tier one and they're in it. And so if
they are now, sure.
And especially if you take into account that this is a very patient owner. And so if you take that into account and you have a longer leash, I think that gives you a little bit more leeway to say, like, we're okay right now with Mikey outside, Jonathan Jones inside, and seeing what Marshawn Lattimore is and if he can regain his form. So if we need to start Will Johnson on IR, or we need to slow play him as a first-round pick, at 29, we don't have as many glaring needs. We're a better team, etc. And we have that kind of leash. We're not getting fired in week 4. We're not getting fired after next season. We're not getting fired in 2 years. So you have the ability to take a risk on a high-end player in a way that a lot of other teams do not because of their situation in the front office and on the coaching staff.
Look, I'd be all in, especially if they made the pick. I would trust it that they feel good about it. But God, I would be shocked if he's there at 29. The Shamar Stewart thing, I talked about this, I think, earlier this week. And I had forgotten the player that had been described this way. Of course, he's like a physical freak, but I don't think he has any feel for football. He's a straight line athlete. And it finally occurred to me as you guys were talking about him, because Cooley used to say about Perry Riley that really athletic, the whole thing, but when the action's going in one direction, he's running the other way. I'm not saying Shamar Stewart is that, but I just don't think he has the feel of a football player, which is why the production hasn't been there. I know the pressures have been there, and maybe he can get coached up to that, but I think that's one of those things that's innate. Spatial feel, vision, athletic feel. He just doesn't have it when I've watched him. But physical freak, which is why I don't think he'll be there at 29. Somebody will think that his athleticism is just too tantalizing to pass on.
Yeah, or just quickly, Kevin, it's a traits position, though. And that is the position that if you just want a freak athlete at, you're like, hey, man, see that guy with the ball right there? Go get him. And
maybe.
He's disruptive.
We'll see. He couldn't get him in college.
He's disruptive in the run game, too. And I think that's an important thing. And in a division with Jalen Hurts, you can chase Jalen Hurts. And that speed matters.
Thanks for this, guys. Appreciate it. Good luck the rest of the day. Have fun.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Craig and Chris, everybody, all day long, all night long tonight when you add in Linnell and Toby doing draft coverage. Ben Standig next. Ben Standing's with us. He's with us every Monday and Friday, but not on draft week and not on Thursday night football games, which They might have a Thursday night football game next year, and they also might have a Thursday day game next year because Thanksgiving's on Thursday and Christmas is on Thursday. By the way, we are less than a month away from the schedule coming out. We are less than 2 weeks away from my mock schedule. Ben Standig had his mock draft completed last night and up. Ben is a multi-time mock draft champion. And his is one that was very anticipated when it came out late last night. And I immediately this morning when I woke up went to see who you had. You will divulge that here shortly, but here we are on draft day. What are you hearing, if anything? What do you think happens with respect to a trade back or not a trade back? Just give me your overall thoughts as we head into, a draft that seems weird for us with them picking at 29.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously, any year if you're picking that late in the first round, it's pretty hard to anticipate, what's going to be on the board this year, as you've discussed many times, I'm sure, and I concur based on my own work here the last few weeks. It is really challenging to figure out any type of rhyme or reason as to what's going on. So, look, obviously, Adam Peters, like the one thing we know from Adam Peters is he said, I think it was the owners meeting, that, he would love to trade down. That's about the one piece of information that we've gotten out of him for sure. But, obviously the whole deal, you got to have somebody who's willing to do it. I think the question is going to be probably the quarterbacks and maybe the offensive linemen. Where do the runs on those positions go? And, if there's some options there late in the first round and some teams like, hey, quarterback, it's obvious why teams want a quarterback. Offensive tackle, important position that gets very thin after the first handful of picks. So I think those are the ones to keep an eye on. Beyond that, look, I think we understand their needs, and they should be in position to get whether it's an edge rusher or a cornerback or an offensive playmaker. If they want one of those guys and they're sitting there at 29, they should have some options for sure.
So Ben's mock, before we get to his, you mentioned that you had 43 players for 32 spots. But the thing you did, which was one of my bold predictions, and it is bold because the over-under on quarterbacks remains at 2.5, even though you got to pay minus 190, minus 195 if you go under on this. But you also decided that just one quarterback would get selected in the first round, and your trades back into the first round are not for quarterbacks. So give me your thoughts on quarterbacks in the first round and then go to the trades that you had in the first round.
Yeah, look, if Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart end up in the first round, nobody should be surprised about that. But look, I think here's the thing with quarterbacks. Like in the context of this mock draft and in the context of the contest that you mentioned, right? You get points for if you have a player in the first round, and if you have the exact match. And I could sit here and say, sure, the Steelers at 21 taking Shedeur Sanders, it's been discussed a lot. But only so many teams need a quarterback, right? It's not like any team could at any point could say, yeah, we'll take a defensive end. But with quarterbacks, it's only like 3 or 4 teams, and it feels like at this point, Sanders may be getting all the way to the Steelers at 21, and if the Steelers do anything but take him, then I think he may fall out. The Browns and the Giants are 2 teams that we all believe would want to get a quarterback, even though we believe they're both going to pass on these guys at 2 and 3. The thing is, though, they also have the first and second pick respectively in the second round. So depending on how the board goes, they don't have to necessarily do much of anything. And, look, the fact that Jalen Milroe is going to be in Green Bay, which is odd considering typically you only go to the draft if you think you're going in the first round. Does that mean he is? Nobody is projecting that, but at the same time, why is he there? Maybe he's there because he's going to be one of the first picks in the second round. So I just think it's pretty complicated to just say it's going to happen. So again, the Giants trading in for Jackson Dart, I totally get it. The Steelers taking Sanders, totally get it. But, again, in the draft with so much uncertainty, I just didn't think it was compelling enough to say that that's the odds of that happening are that strong.
So tell me about the trades that you made. Tell everybody about the trades, because you did have a couple of trades in the first round. We have not had one yet, I mean, at this point. So they weren't for quarterbacks. Talk about who they were for.
Yeah, so I was just double checking. I think both the trades I have were within the first round. So every team still has one first rounder. But in terms of what I did here, so in talking to people over the last few days around the league, what do we think this team's going to do? What do you make of this? And I can't tell you, like, several times we were talking about whatever, some player or some team, and somebody would mention, don't sleep on Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, going there. Not that necessarily that team has a left tackle need, but he may be the one guy in this class that, in a class where so many people look at these tackles and think that guy's a guard, he's like the one that physically and his play style scream tackle. He's falling, or not falling, but he slipped to probably the back half of the first round because he had an ACL tear last year at Ohio State. But I had one GM tell me that he would have had him as the number one tackle and would pick him fourth where New England is going if he was on the clock. So I had Kansas City. I think we all understand Kansas City could use some offensive line help. They're picking at 31, so I had them trading up to Tampa Bay at 19. The Bucs are one of those teams like Washington where they have fewer draft picks right now than the standard 7. So for them to get more picks and for the Chiefs to lock up the possibly the best left tackle going here before we get into the 20s, where some other teams are going to want to make that kind of move. And then Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, he's been considered, take out Travis Hunter. Other than Travis Hunter, he's been considered for some to be arguably the best cornerback in this class, but he's coming off an injury, and he had to do a private workout recently because he wasn't able to do everything at the combine, and he didn't run the 40, and he did a lot of other stuff, but he didn't run the 40, and I think that's definitely raised a lot of eyebrows, like, well, what's going on here? So, between that and some of the other injuries, like, I think he falls. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah, I believe, had him falling out of the first round, which is pretty nuts in terms of
really
just where yeah. And I don't think he was the only one. I think I saw that somewhere else too. So, so I was like, well, I was, to be honest, like, I wasn't hearing he was falling out of the first round, but I was already suspicious about the whole deal. So anyway, I had him dropping, but in the context, if I'm going to keep him in there, the Buffalo Bills have been pegging for a cornerback. That feels like one of their bigger needs. So if Will Johnson's sliding, and there's a reason to still think, hey, he's a good player. We're not worried about the injury situation. I had the Bills trading up for a guy. So arguably they're getting the number 2 cornerback in the draft at 24. The Vikings have the fewest picks in the in the draft with only 4. So they drop back to 31 and, they drop back to 30 and take Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. Their safety, Harrison Smith, he's even older than Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz, so they need a succession plan, and they get one there with Starks.
This Will Johnson thing is interesting to me because Craig just said, that he made the pick. He said he falls to 29 and Washington, takes him. You just said that, who was it that has him out of the first round?
I think it was Daniel Jeremiah.
Jeremiah's got him out of the first round? I mean, Will Johnson, correct me if it was Sanders still the defensive MVP of the national championship game, or was it Will Johnson? Because they were both dominant players. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I thought it was Sanders still. I mean, look, here's the thing, right? We go through months and months of this mock draft stuff and analysts and who this guy's great, this guy's this. But so much of this comes into the things that even the people on the TV don't know what's happening. That is often the medicals and the personals. So,
yeah, it's the medical.
I think Jeremiah also had Mike Green out of the first round, the defensive end out of Marshall, who had, he's got some legal issues to sort through when he was at his time when he was at the University of Virginia. So, tell me
he's got Pierce out of the first round too.
That one I don't recall, but not everybody.
If he's got
sold
Green
on
out of the
Pierce.
first round, he's got to have Pierce out of the first round. The more and more you hear about Pierce, that would be, at this point, a surprise if he gets picked in the first round.
I don't know. Like I was talking to somebody with another team, and they, in discussing exactly this, they said, and obviously I don't know all the details, but they were saying that from what they know, they're less worried about Pierce's issues than they were, or at least they have more questions about Green's situation than Pierce. I think with Pierce, it's just like sort of how much does he kind of burn for football and some other things. But that's always tricky.
You had Pierce out of your first round, and you had Green in it.
I did. I mean, like I said, I saw that, Jeremiah had him out of the first. I was like, well, I don't quite know what's going on there. He's been typically mocked in the, somewhere in the middle of the first round. So look, in a draft where anything, so many things can happen. Like I said, typically I would say when I'm doing these things, when I'm making the 32 picks, I probably have like 3 or 4 guys that I'm like, kind of wish I could figure out a way to get them in, but can't. I mean, I'm not kidding when I tell you I had like 13 or 14 extras, and that's just my list. Other people might have had other players that could maybe raise it up to closer to 50. So, it is all over the place. I mean, even just at the very end here, I had the Eagles at 32 taking Mason Taylor, Jason Taylor's son, the tight end out of LSU.
Yeah.
There's a sense that they're going to move on from Dallas Goedert, and we always view the Eagles as wanting that lineman, which is reasonable, of course. But I was, but this started to get some attention, and it kind of makes sense. I didn't have Mason Taylor in any mock draft until yesterday, like for the last 3 months. Like I've never thought about it. But once you start,
I love your late changes. Your late changes usually work out for you.
Well, we'll see. I mean,
they have.
I'm gonna overthink about. I'm gonna overthink the ones I didn't do. When we get to Washington, I'll tell you some of my debates. But yeah, I mean, this is the combinations. But obviously, there's always the butterfly effect. You may have this team do this thing, and all of a sudden, it can change all the picks behind it. But this year, it's just without any real consensus, it just felt, one notable thing to be crazy. So when you see these dramatic moves, like I said, Will Johnson, Green, you haven't mentioned it yet, so I don't know if you noticed, but you said the other day you thought Omarion Hampton was a guy like you wouldn't want Washington to take, and inexplicably, for the first time this whole cycle, I didn't have him in my first round. Now, that's largely because I feel like either he or Travion Henderson goes in the first round, but probably not both. That could be wrong, but if either one gets past 22, where the Chargers are, I just don't know if I see a fit. So rather than guess which one would potentially go, I just cut them both out. And I wasn't the only one that had Hampton out of the first round as well. I don't remember who. I think maybe McShay or somebody else, but. It's also a deep position. It was kind of like, well, if there's a position where teams are going to say, well, maybe we can get this later, feels like a running back. So I know you said the other day you didn't think Hampton was all that.
It's not that I don't think he's all that. I just don't see a running back because of the value equation worth taking in the first round other than Ashton Genty. I think after Genty, you can put a list of like 11 guys together that all have it's a great running back class, and it's going to matter preference, what your need is, who you like. And I think, any one of the 11 could be the second best running back out of this draft, but I just don't think anybody deserves to be in the first round. It just wouldn't surprise me if Henderson went in the first round because of his big play ability. But and it wouldn't surprise me based on all the mocks. I wanted to ask you something real quickly. Other than yours, and I'm being serious when I say this, for those of you who don't know, Ben has been an excellent mock drafter over the years. Like he's won multiple, mock draft contests over the years. But of the national guys, because I just pulled up Jeremiah's mock draft, I guess it's his final, and you're right. Green's not in it. Will Johnson's not in it. Pierce isn't in it either. Who of the national guys actually is good? I have no idea. Like Jeremiah, McShay, Kuiper, who's good at this consistently?
So, right. So there's two ways to look at this. There's the mock drafts that go on from the start of the college football season up until 2 weeks out of the draft, right? Those are the ones where, yeah, sure, they may have some kind of guess, but they're basically just their own personal thoughts to a lot of degree. They think this player is better than this other player, so they're going to move this guy, into this pick, or they think this team should do this. I think at that point, I don't know that anybody is particularly all that. It's at the very end, though, like in this case,
right?
Look, I mean, Daniel Jeremiah is part of NFL Network. He's on TV. He does stuff with the Chargers, during the preseason and the season, I think. So, he's obviously around all these people. Peter Schrager, I think last year had a pretty good one. He's another guy, obviously, right? He seems to have the ear of a lot of people around the league. It's not the exact same thing you're talking about, but part of the Huddle Report, they also have a contest for the big board. So it's your top 100, your top 100 players, and then you get graded based on just simply how many did you have in the top 100. McShay has typically done the best of the people we talk about. Of that group, that's not the same as the mock, but it shows that he at least has a feel typically for who's going to be in the draft, in the first 3 rounds. So, I think there, but honestly, I think after that, here's the other thing. As because you put people like me on the spot sometimes, they don't love the mock drafts necessarily because you're now on the spot saying this team is going to do this thing or this guy's going to go here. So I don't think they care as much, to be super honest, up until the end, right? And then they have to get a little more serious about it. So I think like I said, I think those guys are fine. Let me be super duper honest. They're all fine. If they were all the next coming of the draft evaluators, they'd be working for a team, right? I mean, obviously,
yeah.
Television gets more money than a regional scout. I'm not saying that, but it's we got them up because they're the ones we're being told are the experts. I mean, Kuiper is sort of a separate category because he obviously kind of invented this whole thing. But everybody else, it's like they're just the one who happens to be there. They're worthy of it. I'm not saying they're given a job, but I don't necessarily know that they're always that much better. But they have more access. This is what they do, and the ESPN or whoever the site is telling us, hey, this is the person we're presenting, and then now you have to just buy that they kind of know what they're talking about.
All right, we're talking to Ben Standig, of course, at Ben Standig on X on Twitter. Last Man Standig is his podcast. Read him at The Athletics. So we'll get to Washington here in a moment, but just tell me, because every year there is, a pick that you had in your mock that you're kind of proud of this one, or I'm kind of feeling like this one's going to be a bit of a surprise for people because I'm one of the only people that has this. Who's that person this year for you? Or maybe it's more than one.
Well, I think one is the player we're going to discuss for Washington. So I won't get on that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking through my list here really quick. I don't know. I mean, I moved this around so much over the last 48 hours. I don't know. When I won the contest a few years ago, there was one. The Chargers picked this kid, or was it Guillory, something like that. I literally had him in that spot for 3 months, and I never changed it once. That one was I was pretty proud of. He wasn't necessarily a good player ultimately, but that's not the point. So I don't necessarily have anything like that. I guess I will say that, in case of a Will Johnson, if he does slide, I've been constantly in my own rough draft dropping him into the 20s, but it felt like I was the only one who was kind of doing that. Everybody kept saying how good he is, and now all of a sudden, like I said, he's getting knocked out of the first round, and maybe that's for injury, but I was paying attention to that during the whole process. So that's sort of an example. I think for me this time it's been more of reading the tea leaves on a guy like that as opposed to necessarily saying he's going to be the pick to team X. So it's more like that.
I would say the fact that you've got one quarterback is going to be unique, and maybe not that unique right now, and that you put Mason Taylor in the first round at the end. Now, I've seen some of that, but him mocked to Philadelphia is interesting. By the way, Will Johnson was the MVP of the national championship game in 2024. when they beat Washington in the title game. He was the defensive MVP. Will Johnson, to me, was like the star. I loved Sanders still, don't get me wrong, and remember what Saban said about Sanders still, best pound-for-pound player in the draft last year. But, man, a guy like Will Johnson, if he were sitting there at 29, I would wonder why the hell he's there at 29. I think it would definitely mean the injuries that he really struggled with this year in 2024 were a concern. All right, let's get to how many players were in contention for your Washington pick.
Yeah. So in terms of like before, like I laid out the draft, in other words, just thinking of Washington in isolation versus everything else, basically I think I had 5 players. I had Emeka Ibuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. Look, I mean, they got Deebo Samuel and they brought Noah Brown back, but both of those guys are on 1-year deals, and we know they need more speed, youth, playmaking, what have you, on offense. So that would be a guy I think would make sense if he's there. Very clean prospect, one of the better ones. He's also a team captain, all that. I honestly didn't have one specific cornerback I really liked. Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina, older guy, 24. He's coming off an ACL, so there's some questions there. But just his style fits perfectly. I didn't necessarily ultimately think he would be first. Like, he's close, but I just don't know which cornerback they necessarily like the most. I don't know if I believe the Maxwell Hairston aspect, but anyway. But corner in general would make sense as a need generically position. But I honestly didn't have one guy. Travion Henderson, the running back from Ohio State. Kevin, I'm embarrassed to tell you how much time I spent yesterday just staring at that and going, I really want to make this pick. I really want to put Travion Henderson here because I thought about this for like 2 or 3 months. Once I started looking at him more closer and thinking about him as the read option back with Jaden Daniels, and just that, for all the talk we had, earlier in the year about they got to get another receiver, and me constantly, yapping back at people saying, no, you don't need to, in free agency, you don't need to spend on another receiver and Terry McLaurin. But to get more production, big playability out of the backfield would be huge. But ultimately, so that's a challenge. And then, 2 defensive ends, kind of on the opposite sides of the world. You got Donovan Ezaraku, who is, real bendy, athletic presence, had 17 sacks last year for Boston College. He may be sort of the last one of that viewed top 5 or 6 guys who could be there just based on, what I've heard. Could go 19 to Tampa, but he could be there for Washington. And then Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, sort of a guy who's not often mentioned. Hadn't been often mentioned, high in drafts, but just everything I'd read about him just constantly screamed commander. He led the Big Ten in sacks as a 19-year-old sophomore. That he was also a team captain at 19, which says a lot about the person. He's just a relentless pass rusher, excellent against the run as well. So those are the guys that I really kind of narrowed in on. I will say also Josh Connerly, the offensive tackle of Oregon. I definitely have. We've talked about that going tackle, but ultimately I didn't. I guess I didn't ultimately have him in my top 5.
Okay, so let's get to it. You did not see a trade back opportunity for Washington. You kept him at 29, and the selection was.
Well, look, I could play God and just do it, right? I don't have to run the league. I don't have to run it by another GM and make a trade. So sure, I would make a trade if but where's the fun in that? So if Adam Peters can make a trade, he's making a trade. Okay. But that said, with the pick, I went with Scorton, and this is sort of my plant my flag, I guess. If he goes in the first round, and I think either Kansas City or Philadelphia very likely could take him if he doesn't go to Washington. And I like I said before, we know the need, right? We know the Washington's got to get younger, more athletic, more of a pass rush. They got to figure out ways to stop the run. And Scorton kind of is a combination of all of that. Whereas Ezaraku is like a thin 240 range, 240 weight range. Scorton's a bit bigger. He was 280 last year at A&M, but that was because that staff wanted him to bulk up. He dropped back down to about 257 for the combine. That's where he was at Purdue when he led the Big Ten in sacks. And then again, he was a captain at 19 years old. The reason he's not necessarily viewed by a lot of people as a first round.
Not at A&M, at Purdue.
What did I say?
You said he was a team captain at 19 years old at Purdue, not Texas A&M.
Right. At Purdue, yes, and he transferred. Look, I haven't talked to anybody who said, "Wow, that guy's terrible." Like, it's just more he doesn't have like any sort of athletic ceiling.
The reason I have him there is I didn't talk to anybody, and nobody said he's terrible.
Hey, you'd be surprised. There's guys that are going in the first round that people have like strong and negative opinions about.
Yeah,
like I say, his thing is he just doesn't have. He's more of a high floor than a high ceiling guy. But just if this team sticks to the principles they had last year about what they're looking for on the field, off the field, of the players that I was aware of, and I'm not saying other guys aren't close, but like I don't know if there's anybody who had more of the commander profile than this kid. So we'll see. He's not. I don't know if I saw anybody else. I know one other person I think that had him in the first round, not to Washington, but like I said, I had Ezraku going in my mock draft, the pick before Washington to 28. The safe play for me would have just been drop Ezraku back a spot. Would have been fine.
Because you think they would take him if he were on the board at 29. In your mock, you have Detroit taking Ezraku at 28. In addition to Ezraku, is there anybody else in the few picks prior to Washington, if they were on the board, you think they'd take in front of Scorton?
Look, I have Shamar Stewart going 27, the really toolsy, athletic pass rusher. The other one from Texas A&M who has crazy athletic traits but minimal production in college. I have him 27 of the Ravens. If Washington thinks they can be the team that, coaches him up and gets more out of him, then sure. I mean, he would be a fantastic ad because of that athletic burst that he would provide. And that's my only question with Scorton is that with the group that Washington has, they really need an injection of athleticism. And he's, relatively speaking, these other guys, he's not quite that. So if they wanted that, Ezraku would be the better call. Stewart certainly would be the better call. I think we also, the other thing is, again, we all get it. The edge rushers, if we have to label the top need, that would be it. But this is a deep class for edge rushers. There'll be guys in day 2 into the 4th round who, are going to be helpful to teams and can be, potential starters and all that. So does Washington decide, hey, let's pick it? That's why I think like Travion Henderson's interesting. Yeah, it's a deep running back class, but everybody else is sort of role player-ish. He feels like a 3-down potential guy who's got a lot of upside in a lot of different facets. So take him, or you just take another running back later, but not necessarily one who has all his traits. So that's why I could see them passing on defensive end initially. They have to get one. It's not 2. Even if they only have the 5 picks, that would be fine for me. But yeah, I mean, so that's kind of how I looked at why I landed where I landed at 29.
It's funny what you said about Travion Henderson. I think he is a 3-down back, but I don't think he's a 20-plus carry a game guy. And I think there are several of those in the draft. But it would be, I've talked about this for a while too. It's like just picturing, 32. I don't know what number he'd wear here, but in the shotgun next to Jaden would be interesting. By the way, I'll point out, I'm pretty sure, if you didn't say this already, and maybe I just missed it, Nick Scorton, when we first started talking draft after the season, that was your guy.
Yeah, I mean, this was the year because this team kept us all busy a lot longer than normal. I was definitely behind in my usual prep. I'm usually doing mock drafts in October. But once I started diving in, like I said, it was imprinted on my brain, as I'm sure for all of us, of what they were looking for as a player. And obviously it worked well. And, once I started to look at the edge rushers, I'm like, boy, this guy just checks off way too many boxes. And like I said before about like planting a flag, like even if you can even look now, like at the public big boards, they all typically have him in like the 40s or the 50s or even lower where they're at. And look, maybe that's going to be what's going to happen. Maybe he, doesn't go in the first round or even in the top of the second. But it just, everything I kept seeing said that. And I do feel like it's like the momentum has gone in my direction more than not. Even just seeing some people discuss him in this range. And when I've talked to people The only people who seemed to agree with me were some people behind, in the league, sources, that kind of stuff, who were saying, yeah, we really like that guy. He just doesn't profile as a dynamic athlete. And I know I heard Jeremiah on some podcast, I think, say when he pulled up the tape from last year, he wasn't that impressed when he was the heavier version. But then when he went back and looked at the Purdue version, where he was a lighter, where he's going to be at now in the pros, that guy made him a lot more interested. So, again, if you're only kind of going off of last year, then maybe he's not for you. But we'll see.
Nick Scorton, everybody. That's the pick Ben's got at 29 for Washington, defensive end edge out of Texas A&M. Thanks for doing this. We'll talk tomorrow after we have a pick. Thanks.
Well, we'll see if we have a pick. Yeah, see you, man.
Yeah, true. Ben Standig, everybody. All right, phone lines are open. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What's your dream situation, dream scenario, dream pick, dream trade? What do you want to see? What are you hoping to see tonight when Washington either drafts at 29 or maybe your dream is for a trade back? But if you trade back, I want to hear with whom and for which players. All right. 301-230-0980, your chance to weigh in with predictions, what you want on tonight's draft. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right. All right, 3, 2, 1. With the 29th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select Jahdae Barron, cornerback, Texas, who is likely to be considered before 29. It would be an incredible opportunity if he drops to 29. There's so many different. Let me start over. Ready? Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. With the 29th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, Washington selects Jahdae Barron, cornerback, Texas. Love this guy, the versatility. He's played outside. He's played inside. He's played safety at times. He is a playmaker. He's come up big for Texas in some of their biggest games, both Georgia games last year. The one thing about him, he's a bit undersized. He's got shorter arms, but I think his high football IQ, which people rave about, more than makes up for it. I think he'll be the best player on the board if he's on. Max has a trade back and them taking Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, tonight. I have them taking Jahdae Barron at 29. You know, it's possible he's long gone. I think Donovan Azaruko, if he's there at 29, would be the pick. I also think Tyler Booker, if he's there, would be perhaps the pick. But I don't think Booker will be there, and I think Azaruko will be gone as well. I've got Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. He is incredibly high IQ, smart, anticipates well, is a really good football player. The measurables are the things that have people a bit worried. He is on the shorter side at 5'10", 5'11", with the shortest arms of any corner that's projected in the top 3 rounds. That would be the reason he drops, but he's a hell of a football player who played all of, some of his best games in the biggest games that Texas had. I do think Azaruko would be the pick at 29 if he dropped. I think Booker would be the pick potentially if he dropped. It's not going to shock me if they were to take a Travion Henderson at 29. The pick that there are a couple of picks that would surprise me going back to last week. Pierce Jr., I don't think is going to be a pick even in the first round anywhere at this point, despite the talent. I think Luther Burden, he's one of my favorite receivers and has been, but I think there's this concern that he takes plays off. Sounds like Jahan Dotson. I don't see them taking him. And I don't see Omari and Hampton being selected by Washington. I just don't see any of these backs as being worthy of first-round grades after Genty because of the value proposition with a running back in the first round. But to me, if it were Henderson, I'd prefer that over Hampton. And I would be excited to see Henderson in the backfield with Jaden Daniels, with Deebo Samuel, with Austin Eckler, with what they have, in Terry and some of the other players offensively. All right, what do you want? What's your dream scenario tonight? Is it a trade back? If so, who do they end up taking in the second round? At 29, who do they pick? Go ahead and give me your best case for tonight that would make you the happiest. Let's start with Aveen. Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. There's been a lot of Travion Henderson buzz the past 24 hours. McShay yesterday said that Washington is in on Henderson and they prefer him to Hampton. Jeremiah in his mock draft last night has Henderson in the first round at 22 ahead of Hampton.
Wait, who does? Who does?
Jeremiah,
who's got Henderson at 22?
Jeremiah, Daniel Jeremiah.
Oh, yeah, because I just pulled up his draft. I didn't even look because I was looking. Oh, my God, he's got Henderson to the Chargers at 22. He's got Hampton at 26 to the Rams.
Yep.
Okay,
and
go ahead. Sorry.
Lance Zierlein this morning from NFL.com mocked Henderson to us. So I'm feeling like it's a possibility. And I think it's the most sure-handed way to add explosiveness to the offense. With receiver, you have all these other factors like can they beat the press, separate, catching. I think he's a sure-handed way to add explosiveness, which is what we need. And I get he's not a 3-down back yet, but we love running, 21 personnel, the pony formation.
I could see him and Eckler or him and Deebo in the backfield at the same time.
Yeah. So I just think it makes sense. I would be really excited about it. And I think it's something that could happen.
Yeah. Look, I'll be excited about it. I just think the value, like you've got to be sure you're getting a top 5 back for the next, 6 years, 7 years to use a first rounder based on running back value. But Aveen, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to Dre in Landover. Dre, what's your dream scenario tonight?
What's going on, Kevin? Awfully excited it's draft day. Okay, so let me give you my dream scenario is just to come out of the draft with an edge rusher, with a DB. It don't have to be a cornerback. It can be a safety. And I would love to get a running back. So having said that, at pick 29, my dream scenario would be for linebacker / edge rusher Jihad Campbell to fall in Dan Quinn's lap, because this is a guy that's very reminiscent of Micah Parsons. And I can see him using him in that Micah Parsons role And when you have him, Frankie Louvu, because he'll be able to replace what Frankie Louvu's doing in a couple years. So that's my dream, guy to have fall for us at 29.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a chance in hell he's going to fall to 29. But by the way, that's an interesting player because not a lot has been discussed, or I haven't spent a lot of time discussing him, in part because linebacker isn't necessarily what they're looking for. But you are right. The athleticism, number 11 for Alabama was fun to watch. But let me just look because everybody seems to be talking about where does he get picked?
Let me say this, Kevin.
He got in Jeremiah's draft. He's got him at 32. Yeah, interesting. Good. That's a good one, Dre. Yeah.
A lot of injury concerns. He had a labrum
yes,
issue.
He did.
That's why he's dropping. Yeah. We're not going to get a clean prospect.
Missed a lot of the
you're not
the season last year. For whatever reason, Dre keeps going in and out, so we'll drop him there. But that's interesting. Jahad Campbell. That's not a name we've spent a lot of time talking about. Mark that one down in case Dre's right. Let's go to Lap in DC. Lap, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin? I'm gonna say best player. I'm gonna say best player available. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, which I'm not mad about. I would hope they would trade back and get more picks, and then we can kind of address some of the other areas like corner, maybe an offensive lineman or deep edge. Of course, I do want a running back or a receiver or a tight end, but we probably try to not get a tight end maybe to next year. But that'll be my draft scenario. So.
Do you have names in mind?
No names. I just want a serviceable quality player that can come out and do their job. That's it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
And
appreciate it.
Help us out. Yep.
Yeah, appreciate it. So just looking at Jahad Campbell, he's on several boards, he's a top 15 player, but in a lot of mocks, probably because of the position and the injury, there are some mocks that have him, solid middle part of the draft, but there are some mocks that have him out of the first round or very late in the first round. Interesting. Ben's mock has the Bucks trading him after they traded with, who would that have been? The Chiefs. In the first round, and they have the Jahad Campbell being picked there. The surgery is the issue with him, probably more than anything else, and it's linebacker. And I guess we haven't been paying attention necessarily to linebacker, but the dude was unbelievable as a playmaker. Forced fumbles, TFLs, etc. All right, one big thing that got discussed the other day that we have not brought up on this show. I'll do that next when we come back.
All right, last night the Washington Capitals picked up a big win against Montreal by a score of 3-1. Connor McMichael scored the first and last goals for the Washington Caps, and Dylan Strome hit the game winner to put the Caps up 2-1 in the second. The series now moves to Montreal. They will drop the puck tomorrow night, pregame at 6:45 on 106.7 The Fan. The Nats got off to a hot start last night, putting up 3 runs in the first inning. James Wood hit a 430-foot rocket to right center, quickly followed by a Josh Bell 2-run bomb. They win 4-3. They're going for the sweep tonight on 106.7 The Fan. Tonight is the night the NFL draft is upon us. Who will the Commanders take? Coverage right here on Team 980. Craig Hoffman's draft special from 4 to 8, and then Toby Altizer and Linnell Willingham will take you all the way to 1 a.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
So Kevin Durant, the discussion about him this offseason is that the Suns will look to trade him. Carmelo Anthony on his podcast the other day said, quote, KD to the Wizards. I would love to see him with the Wizards. That's just me personally, but end it back home. You're not going to chase. You're not going to go with these other teams that are out there. You already got your rings. Closed quote. Kevin Durant, like somebody told me to look this, look this up. I don't think this is a real thing. The Wizards are still in the mode of trying to lose as many games as possible. They have an 86% chance of not getting Cooper Flag, only a 14% chance of drafting Cooper Flag. They're in the business of accumulating draft choices over the next few years and taking super young players so that in 4 or 5 years, they might be a contender. Kevin Durant would be good enough for them not to lose enough games to end up picking super high or having a chance to pick super high. Would he be the difference in making the playoffs or not making the playoffs? I don't even know. Can't even envision what the team would look like with him on it. Koulibaly and Sarr and George and Carrington, etc. It'd still be such a young basketball team with an old guy playing out his career. I don't see it. It'd be kind of fun, but I don't see it. I don't think that's the direction they're going in. Enjoy the draft. Back tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have a player, or maybe even better, they don't have a player. They've got more picks. Chris Russell next.